September 12, 1945. The Philippines. The air hung thick and heavy over Manila Bay, carrying the smell of salt water and burned wood. The war had been over for exactly 4 weeks, but the landscape still bore the scars. Skeletal buildings reached toward the sky like broken fingers. Rubble lined the streets, and into this shattered world came 3 military trucks, their canvas sides pulled tight, their engines grinding through the humid afternoon. Inside the lead truck, 247 Japanese women pressed against each other in the darkness. They were civilian workers, nurses, and clerks, and women from the comfort stations. Women who had followed the Japanese military and now found themselves trapped in a defeated nation's collapse. Their clothes were torn and filthy, stained with weeks of hiding in the jungle through the surrender. Some were barely 19, others were in their 30s, but every single one of them was terrified. Ko pressed her face against a gap in the canvas. 24 years old, a typist from Osaka, she had spent the last 3 years of her life in military administrative offices, typing orders and requisitions and casualty reports. Her fingers, once smooth and quick on the keys, were now cracked and bleeding. Her hair, which her mother had always kept so carefully brushed, hung in matted tangles around her face. But it was her eyes that told the real story. Wide, haunted. The eyes of someone who expected to die. Next to her, a younger girl named Yuki gripped Ko's sleeve with both hands. 19 years old, from a small fishing village near Nagasaki, Yuki had been a clerk filing papers and answering phones. Now she trembled like a leaf in wind. "They are taking us to the river," Yuki whispered. "I heard the soldiers talking." They said water. The word spread through the truck like sickness. Water. River. Drowning. These women had all been told the same stories by imperial propaganda. The Americans were barbarians, demons. They would torture Japanese women in ways too horrible to speak aloud. They would drown them in river stones tied to their feet. Or worse, much worse. Death before dishonor, the empire had commanded. Better to die with honor than live as an American prisoner. The truck slowed, then stopped. In the sudden silence, the women could hear it clearly now. The sound of running water. A river. Close. Very close. Ko felt her throat tighten. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought they might crack. This was it. This was how it would end. Not in a clean death on a battlefield, but drowned like an animal in a muddy Philippine river. She thought of her mother in Osaka, wondered if she would ever know what happened to her daughter. "We stay together?" Ko whispered to the women around her. "We do not give them the satisfaction of seeing us afraid." But Yuki's eyes filled with tears. "I do not want to die. I just want to see my mother." The canvas flap tore open. Harsh afternoon light flooded the truck, momentarily blinding them. American voices barked orders in English words they could not understand, but they understood the tone. Commands. Move. Now. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Machiko, a head nurse in her 30s, stood slowly. She had tended wounded soldiers in field hospitals from Burma to Luzon. She had seen men die in ways that would haunt her forever, and she would not die cowering in a truck. She walked to the edge, her head held high, her back straight. The others followed because there was nothing else to do. One by one, they stepped down into the Philippine afternoon, their legs weak, their bodies shaking. And they saw where they had been brought, a clearing beside a wide, slow-moving river. The water was brown and murky, moving with a lazy current that caught the afternoon light. American soldiers stood in casual groups, smoking cigarettes, their rifles slung over their shoulders. They watched the women with expressions that ranged from curiosity to indifference to something that might have been pity. At the water's edge were wooden platforms built out over the river, structures that looked organized, planned, like someone had prepared for this moment. The women clustered together instinctively, a tight knot of fear and desperation. Some prayed silently to ancestors, lips moving without sound. Others simply stared at the water, accepting what they believed was coming. An American officer stepped forward, tall, perhaps 40 years old, with graying hair and tired eyes. He carried a megaphone. Behind him came a Japanese translator, a thin man in civilian clothes who looked almost as frightened as the women. The officer raised the megaphone and spoke. His voice was loud but not cruel, matter of fact, almost bored. The translator repeated his words in Japanese, his voice shaking slightly. You will proceed to the water in groups of 20. You will remove your clothes and bathe. You will be given soap and towels. You will put on clean clothes when you are finished. The words made no sense. Bathe soap. This had to be a trick, some cruel game before the killing started. They are lying, Michiko said quietly. This is how they will humiliate us before they kill us. Walk forward to the water, the translator said again. First group of 20. Now, no one moved. Fear had turned their legs to stone. They stood frozen, waiting for the violence to begin. And that is when Yuki broke. The young girl's scream tore through the afternoon air, raw and desperate and utterly terrified. Please don't push us in, please. We will do anything. Just don't drown us. Her scream unlocked something in the others. Suddenly, women were crying out, pleading in Japanese, begging for mercy in a language the Americans could not understand. Hands clutched at each other, bodies pressed together. Some fell to their knees. The American soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Several looked away. The officer lowered his megaphone and said something to the translator, his voice quieter now, almost gentle. The translator stepped forward, hands raised. No one is going to hurt you. This is for hygiene. You are prisoners of war. You will bathe. You will receive medical care. You will be fed. No one will harm you. Ko felt something shift inside her chest. The man's tone. It was not the voice of an executioner. It was bureaucratic, administrative. The voice of a man following orders that bored him. But buried underneath that boredom was something else. Something she could not quite identify. Michiko stepped forward again. If we must walk to our deaths, then we walk with honor. She selected 19 women with her eyes a silent command. Ko found herself among them. Yuki still clutched her hands so tightly that Ko's fingers had gone numb. Together they walked toward the river, toward the wooden platforms, toward whatever waited for them. Every step felt like walking through water. Time stretched and compressed. Ko could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, a drum rhythm that seemed to shake her entire body. She expected at any moment to feel hands on her back pushing her into the brown water, expected to feel everything end. But when they reached the platforms, they did not find death waiting for them. They found organization. Female American nurses stood on the platforms. Red Cross workers in crisp white uniforms that seemed impossibly clean in this ruined landscape. They wore surgical masks and rubber gloves, which somehow made everything more frightening. Clinical, prepared. Through the translator, one nurse spoke. Remove your clothes. Place them in the bins. You will receive clean clothes after bathing. The women stood frozen again. Remove their clothes in front of soldiers, the final humiliation before death. But the translator pointed behind them. The male soldiers have been moved back beyond the tree line. See, only female nurses will remain close. And it was true, the American men had retreated 50 yards back, their backs deliberately turned away. Only the women in white uniforms remained near the platforms. Ko's mind struggled to process this. If they wanted to humiliate the women, why send the men away? If this was about cruelty, why preserve any modesty at all? Slowly, reluctantly, the women began to undress. Buttons fumbled with shaking fingers. Fabric pulled away from skin that had not been properly cleaned in weeks. Standing naked in the afternoon air, they saw what life in the jungle had done to them. Ribs protruding through skin like ladder rungs. Hip bones jutting sharp enough to cut. Infected insect bites covering legs and arms. They looked like skeletons wrapped in bruised flesh. They were shepherded toward the platforms that extended over the river. This was it, Ko thought. This is where we die. Her feet moved mechanically, one step, another step onto the wooden boards. The river flowed beneath them, brown and endless. But the nurses did not push them in. Instead, they handed each woman something. Ko stared at what she held, unable to process what her eyes were seeing. Soap, real soap, a bar of white soap, rectangular and smooth and impossibly heavy in her hand. She lifted it slowly to her nose, and the smell that hit her nearly buckled her knees. Clean. It smelled clean, like flowers, like something from a world that had ceased to exist. Not the harsh lye soap they had used in military quarters, not the gritty sand they had scrubbed with in the jungle. This was real soap, the kind her mother had kept wrapped in paper in their home in Osaka, saved for special occasions. Ko stood on that platform holding American soap and felt her entire understanding of reality beginning to crack. You will wash completely, the translator said. Hair, body, everything. Use the buckets to draw water from the river. The women stood frozen soap in hand, still not believing, still waiting for the cruelty to reveal itself. One nurse demonstrated the bucket and rope system. Lower the bucket into the river, pull it up full of water, pour it over yourself. Then she pointed at the women and made washing motions with her hands. Go ahead, wash. Michiko went first because Michiko always went first. She pulled up a bucket of river water and poured it over her head in one smooth motion. The water was cool and she gasped. But then she picked up the soap and began to lather it between her hands. And something in her face changed. The soap foamed, thick white foam that spread across her arms, her chest, her neck. And as she rubbed it into her skin, the dirt began to come away. Weeks of jungle grime dissolving under American soap. The other women slowly followed. Bucket after bucket of brown river water. Soap working into thick lather. Dirt dissolving, washing away, flowing back into the river. Ko poured water over her head and felt it run through her matted hair. She worked the soap into a foam and rubbed it over her arms and watched the color of her skin emerge from beneath layers of filth. Around her, she began to hear sounds. Not screams, not crying from fear, but something else. Relief. Deep, shuddering relief. Several women were crying now, but these were different tears. The sensation of being clean. The simple animal pleasure of water and soap after weeks of living like hunted animals in the jungle. It is real, Yuki whispered, tears streaming down her face as she washed her hair. The soap is real. They are not killing us. They are letting us wash. The nurses moved among them, inspecting, checking scalps for lice with gloved fingers, examining infected cuts and bites. Their touches were efficient, professional. Not gentle exactly, but not cruel. They spoke to each other in English words the women could not understand, but the tone was clinical, medical, the tone of people doing a job. The whole process took nearly an hour. Bucket after bucket of water. Soap worked into every part of their bodies. Hair washed and re-washed until it began to look like hair again instead of matted rope. And slowly, gradually, the women began to look less like jungle survivors and more like human beings. When the washing was finished, they were given towels. Rough canvas, not soft, but clean. Dry. They wrapped themselves and stood dripping on the platforms, still half expecting the violence to begin. But it did not come. Instead, they were led to another area where stacks of clothes waited. Simple canvas pants and cotton shirts. Not beautiful, not fashionable, but clean. They smelled of soap and sunshine and something else. Something the women struggled to identify until Ko realized what it was. They smelled American, not Japanese, not military, but like laundry hung in an Iowa backyard dried by prairie wind under an endless sky. Ko pulled on the pants and shirt. They were too big for her shrunken frame hanging loose on her body, but they were clean. For the first time in months, she wore something that did not smell of decay and fear and desperation. After all, 247 women had been processed after they all stood clean and dressed in American clothes. They were marched to a large tent set up in the clearing. And the smell that hit them when they entered that tent stopped every woman in her tracks. Food. Real food. Tables ran the length of the tent with enormous pots sitting on them. Steam rose in the golden afternoon light filtering through the canvas. White rice. Not the moldy, weevil-infested scrapings they had eaten in the jungle, but pure white rice, fluffy and perfect, more rice than Ko had seen in 3 years. Next to the rice were other pots, stew with chunks of actual meat floating in rich brown gravy, vegetables, carrots, and potatoes, and piles of bread. American bread, white and soft, stacked like clouds. The women stood at the entrance, unable to move, unable to process what they were seeing. This had to be a dream, a hallucination brought on by starvation and fear. Sit, the translator said. You will eat. Still no one moved. The gap between expectation and reality had become too vast to cross. They had expected death. They had received soap. They had expected cruelty. They had received clean clothes. And now this. Food. More food than they had seen in years. The American officer who had spoken through the megaphone at the river walked to the food tables. He picked up a tin plate and began to fill it. Rice scooped into a generous mound. Stew ladled over the top. 2 pieces of bread placed on the side. Then he walked directly to Michiko and held out the plate. The translator spoke. He says, "Please eat. You must be very hungry." Michiko took the plate with trembling hands. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then she picked up a spoon, dipped it into the rice, and brought it to her mouth. Her eyes closed. A sound escaped her throat. Something between a crumb and a moan. And that sound broke the dam. The women rushed forward, grabbed plates, loaded them with food, sat at the tables and ate. And as they ate, they cried. Ko sat beside Yuki, her plate piled high with more food than she could possibly finish. She ate slowly at first, afraid her stomach would reject it. But the food was so good. The rice was perfect. The stew was rich and salty. The bread, God, the bread, soft and white and like eating clouds. Around her, the tent filled with sounds of women eating and weeping. Some ate frantically, as if afraid the food would disappear. Others ate slowly, reverently, savoring every bite. Ko watched an older woman, a nurse named Sato, hold a piece of bread in both hands and cry over it before taking her first bite. "Why are they feeding us?" Yuki whispered between bites. "We are the enemy. We lost the war. Why would they give us food like this?" Ko had no answer. According to everything they had been taught, the Americans were supposed to be barbarians, demons, creatures without honor or humanity. But here was rice. Here was meat. Here was kindness where hatred should have been. When the meal was finished, when every woman had eaten until they could eat no more, they were taken to another set of tents, sleeping quarters. Inside each tent were rows of cots, simple military cots with thin mattresses, but each one had a pillow and a blanket. Each woman was assigned a cot, a space of her own, a place to sleep that was not the jungle floor. Ko lay down on her cot that night, her stomach full for the first time in months, her body clean, wearing clothes that did not smell like rot. She stared at the canvas ceiling and listened to the sounds of 247 women settling into sleep. Some were still crying softly. Others whispered to each other in the darkness. She thought about the soap, the weight of it in her hand, the smell of flowers. She thought about the rice and the meat and the soft white bread. She thought about the American soldiers turning their backs at the river, preserving the women's modesty when they could have watched. She thought about the officer handing Michiko a plate of food with his own hands. These were supposed to be monsters, demons, the enemy. So why did Ko feel safer tonight than she had felt in the last year of the war? Michiko had said that kindness was a weapon, that the Americans were trying to break them with softness. But lying on her cot, her belly full, her skin clean, Ko wondered if maybe the weapon was not kindness itself. Maybe the weapon was truth. And maybe what was breaking was not her loyalty, but her belief in the lies she had been fed. Koyuki whispered in the darkness, "Are we going to be okay?" Ko thought about that question, thought about the soap and the food and the way the nurses had touched their infected bites with gloved but gentle hands. Thought about the officer's tired eyes when he had spoken through the megaphone. "I think so," Ko whispered back. "I think we might be." And in that darkness, in a tent full of enemy women on foreign soil, Ko felt something she thought she had lost forever. Something small and fragile and dangerous. Hope. The feeling terrified her more than the thought of drowning ever had, because hope meant believing that tomorrow might be different. Hope meant accepting that the enemy might not be what she had been taught. And if the enemy was not what she had been taught, then what else had been a lie? Ko closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But her mind kept returning to one image, a bar of white soap smelling of flowers handed to her by a woman in a white uniform. Such a small thing, such an ordinary thing. But in that moment, that bar of soap had changed everything. She just did not know yet how much. The bell rang at 6 o'clock in the morning, sharp and insistent. Ko woke with a start, her body jerking upright on the cot, her heart hammering. For a confused moment, she did not know where she was. Then the memories flooded back. The river, the soap, the food. She was in an American prison camp, and she was still alive. Around her, 247 women stirred in rows. They made their cots with military precision habits from their time serving the Japanese Empire. The canvas and blankets pulled tight, corners tucked. Even as prisoners, even in enemy hands, some routines remained. They lined up outside the tents for roll call. American soldiers walked down the rows, checking faces against a roster. The morning air was cool, carrying the smell of cooking food from somewhere beyond the tents. Ko's stomach growled despite having eaten more last night than she had in weeks. Her body did not yet trust that food would keep coming. Then came breakfast. They were marched to the mess tent again, and Ko felt her steps slow as they approached. Part of her expected the food to be gone, expected last night to have been some kind of cruel dream. But when they entered the tent, the tables were laid out again. Different food this time, large pots of something the women did not recognize. Oatmeal, the translator explained, with brown sugar, and there was toast, stacks of bread toasted golden brown, small packets of butter, and coffee, real coffee steaming in enormous urns. Ko took her portion and sat. The oatmeal was strange, thick and sweet, unlike anything she had eaten before. But it was warm and filling. The toast with butter was a revelation. She had never tasted butter like this, rich and creamy and yellow as sunshine. Yuki sat beside her, eating slowly, her eyes wide with something between wonder and guilt. How can they have so much? Yuki whispered. Japan is starving. Our families are eating sawdust mixed with rice, and the Americans have butter, coffee, more food than they can eat. Ko had no answer. She spread butter on another piece of toast and tried not to think about her mother. In Osaka, tried not to imagine what her family was eating this morning, if they were eating at all. The first week passed in a rhythm that felt surreal. Morning bell, roll call, breakfast, then work assignments. The Americans needed help with various tasks around the camp, and they put the prisoners to work. Some women were assigned to the laundry, washing the enormous amounts of linen and uniforms. Others worked in the kitchens, preparing food under the supervision of American cooks. A group tended a vegetable garden that had been planted behind the camp. Ko, because she could type and had worked in administrative offices, was assigned to the camp headquarters, a small building with a tin roof where American officers handled paperwork and correspondence. She was given a desk, a typewriter, and stacks of documents that needed to be translated or filed or copied. And that is where she met Sergeant William Patterson. Bill Patterson was 32 years old, from a small farm outside Des Moines, Iowa. He had sandy brown hair that was starting to thin, blue eyes that looked tired, and hands that were more accustomed to farm work than military service. He had been drafted in 1942, fought his way across the Pacific through campaigns that left scars on his mind, if not his body, and now found himself in charge of administrative operations for a prisoner of war camp in the Philippines. He did not want to be there, did not want to process paperwork for Japanese prisoners, did not want to look at their faces every day and be reminded that his younger brother James would never come home. But orders were orders, and Bill Patterson had learned a long time ago that you followed orders even when they hurt. Ko was typing a supply requisition when Bill first walked into the office. She stood immediately, her back straight, her eyes down, expecting orders, expecting command barked in English she barely understood. But Bill just nodded at her and said, "Good morning." Then he went to his own desk and began working. Ko sat back down, slowly, confused. That was it. No inspection, no interrogation. She returned to her typing, her fingers finding the familiar rhythm on the keys. The sound filled the small office. Click, 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 ding. Click, 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 ding. After an hour, Bill stood and walked to Ko's desk. He pointed at the document she was working on and spoke in slow, careful English. This needs 3 copies. Can you make carbons? Ko nodded. Yes, 3 copies. She understood enough English for basic work instructions. Thank you, Bill said. Then he returned to his desk. By the end of the first day working in the office, Ko realized something strange. Bill Patterson treated her like a person doing a job. Not like an enemy, not like a prisoner, not like someone beneath him. He said please and thank you. He never raised his voice. When she made a mistake on a document, he simply showed her the error and asked her to redo it. No anger, no punishment, just correction. It was the strangest thing Ko had ever experienced from someone in authority. The work assignments came with payment, camp scripts, small paper bills that could be used at the canteen. The canteen opened 3 times a week, and when Ko first saw what was available there, she had to grip the edge of a table to stay standing. Toothbrushes, combs, writing paper and envelopes, soap, and incredibly, impossibly chocolate. American chocolate bars in brown wrappers. Hershey's, the label said. 5 cents in camp script. Ko stood before those chocolate bars and could not make herself reach for one. Chocolate. While her family starved. Chocolate that cost less than she earned in a day of typing. But Yuki, young and less burdened by guilt, bought a Hershey bar with her first week's script. She broke it in half outside the canteen and handed half to Ko. Taste, Yuki insisted. Just taste it. Ko put the chocolate in her mouth. The sweetness exploded across her tongue, rich and creamy, and unlike anything she had tasted in years. Not the bitter, dark chocolate from before the war. This was smooth and sweet and utterly American. Tears sprang to Ko's eyes. She stood there holding half a Hershey bar, crying, while Yuki ate her half with an expression of pure bliss. That night, Ko tried to write a letter to her mother. The Americans allowed prisoners to send letters, though they were read and censored first. Ko sat with her paper and pen and tried to find words. Dear Mother, I am alive and well. I am in an American prison camp, but we are being treated fairly. I have enough to eat. Please do not worry. Your daughter Ko. She read it over 3 times, then crumpled it up. How could she tell her mother, probably starving in Osaka, that her daughter was eating beef stew and buying chocolate? How could she describe the soap and the clean clothes and the cots with pillows? It felt like a betrayal, like bragging about comfort while her family suffered. So she wrote a different letter. Shorter. Vaguer. I am alive. I am being treated according to the laws of war. I hope to see you soon. Nothing about the food, nothing about the chocolate, nothing about the kindness. Some truths were too dangerous to write down. By the 3rd week, Ko had gained weight, not much but enough that her clothes fit better. Her skin had cleared. The infected bites had healed under the care of American medics who distributed antibiotic ointment and bandages. Her hair, washed regularly now with real soap, had regained some of its shine. She looked healthy, and that health felt like guilt made visible. The afternoons brought free time. After work assignments ended, the women could walk around the camp, sit under trees, talk, play simple games. Some women used this time to write letters. Others simply sat and tried to process everything that was happening to them. Ko often walked to the edge of the camp to the fence line and stood looking out at the Philippine landscape, the destroyed buildings, the jungle beyond, the sky that seemed too blue for a world at war. One afternoon, she found a group of women gathered under a tree talking in hushed voices. Michiko was there along with several of the older nurses. Ko approached quietly and listened. We must remember who we are, Michiko was saying. Her voice was firm, certain. The Americans are breaking us with kindness, with food and soap and comfort. They want us to forget our duty, to forget Japan. We must resist. But they are kind to us, a younger woman said softly. Does that not mean something? Michiko's expression hardened. Kindness is a weapon, more dangerous than bullets because you do not see it coming. They feed us so we will feel grateful. They treat us well so we will feel indebted. And when we go home, we will speak well of them. That is their strategy. Ko listened and said nothing. Michiko's words made sense in a certain way. Strategy, propaganda, winning hearts and minds. But Ko remembered the tired look in the officer's eyes at the river, the way Bill Patterson said, "Thank you for typing a simple document." Were those things calculated, strategic, or were they just human? She walked away from the group feeling more confused than before. That evening, the Americans showed a movie. A white sheet hung between 2 poles, a projector set up on a table. The women sat on the ground and watched American stories flicker across the screen. A comedy about a man who kept getting into absurd situations. The dialogue was in English, incomprehensible to most of the women, but the physical comedy needed no translation. And some of the women laughed. Ko heard the sound and felt a chill run through her. Laughing at American entertainment, while Japan lay in ruins, while their families starved. How could they laugh? But the laughter came anyway, because laughter was involuntary. Because after weeks of terror and uncertainty, the human body craved release. And a man falling downstairs was funny in any language. Ko did not laugh, but she wanted to, and that wanting felt like a betrayal. The letters from home began arriving in October. The first wave came on a Tuesday, delivered by an American soldier who distributed them with the same casual efficiency he might use to hand out supplies. Ko's name was called. She took the envelope with shaking hands, her mother's handwriting, thin paper. She opened it carefully and read, "My dear daughter, Osaka is destroyed. Our house was burned in the firebombing." We live now in a corner of a warehouse with 6 other families. Food is scarce. We receive rice mixed with sawdust every 3 days. Your father collapsed from hunger last month, but has recovered. Your brother has dysentery, but we have no medicine. We bow our heads and survive. Please come home. We need you, Mother. Ko read the letter 3 times. Each time the words hit harder. Rice mixed with sawdust. Her father collapsing. Her brother sick with no medicine. And she had eaten beef stew last night. She had gained 3 pounds. She had bought chocolate. Yuki received a letter too. After reading it, she ran to her tent and did not come out for hours. When Ko finally found her, Yuki was curled on her cot, sobbing into her pillow. My mother says they eat grass soup, Yuki cried. Grass, like animals. My little sister is so thin, you can see every bone. She drew a picture. Ko, my sister, drew me a picture, and I can see the hunger in the pencil strokes. That night, several women refused dinner. Ko among them. She sat at the table and stared at the food and could not make herself eat. Not while her family ate sawdust. Not while Yuki's sister drew pictures with shaking, malnourished hands. But refusing food did not help their families. It only made the American medics concerned. The next day, one of the nurses, a woman named Dorothy from Texas, pulled Ko aside. She was in her late 20s with brown hair and kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Ko of her aunt back home. Through the translator, Dorothy spoke. I know you received letters from home. I know it is hard, but starving yourself will not feed your family. You did not start this war. You can only survive it and hope to see them again. Ko stared at this American woman, this enemy, who was telling her things that made sense but felt impossible to accept. Eat, Dorothy said firmly. Live. Go home to your family when this is over. That is how you honor them, not by starving yourself in sympathy. That night, Ko ate, not much but enough, and the guilt felt like stones in her stomach. The contrast became more visible as the weeks passed. American soldiers walked through the camp, well-fed, their uniforms clean, and pressed, laughing and joking with each other. They had cigarettes and chewing gum, and letters from home that did not speak of starvation. The women watched them with a mixture of fascination and resentment. How can they be so casual? Yuki asked one day, watching a group of soldiers play cards outside their barracks. Do they not know what their bombs did? Do they not care that people are dying? Maybe they do know, Ko said quietly. Maybe they care. But what are they supposed to do? Starve themselves in sympathy? Stop living because others are suffering? It was the same question Dorothy had posed to her, and Ko was beginning to understand that there were no good answers. Only survival. Only the slow, grinding continuation of existence in a world that had been broken and had not yet decided how to heal. One afternoon, Bill Patterson was filing casualty reports. Ko saw him pause, his face going still and sad. He stood there for a long moment, holding a piece of paper, his jaw tight. Then he walked to Ko's desk and showed her the report. His finger pointed to a name. Corporal James Patterson, killed in action. Okinawa, April 1945. My brother Bill said quietly. Ko looked up at him. Looked at this American sergeant who had lost his brother to Japanese bullets, who had every reason to hate her, to hate all of them. And yet he said please and thank you. And yet he brought classical music to the office so she could listen while she worked. I am sorry, Ko said in English. The words felt inadequate, tiny against the weight of death. Bill looked at her for a long moment. Me too, he said. War makes everyone sorry. He took the report back and filed it away. But Ko sat at her desk, shaking. Bill Patterson's brother had died fighting her countrymen, and still he treated her with dignity. What did that mean? What kind of person could do that? That evening, Ko found herself at the camp fence again, staring out at nothing, trying to process everything. Yuki joined her. Do you still think they are monsters? Yuki asked. Ko was silent for a long time. I do not know what they are, she finally said. I do not know what we are. I do not know anything anymore. Maybe the monsters are the ones who lied to us, Yuki said quietly. It was the most dangerous thought Ko had ever encountered, more dangerous than any weapon. Because if their own leaders had lied, if the propaganda had been false, then what had they been fighting for? What had all the death and suffering been for? Ko turned to look at Yuki. The young girl who had screamed at the riverbank, who had thought she would die that day, who now ate chocolate and listened to gospel singing and was beginning to smile again. Yes, Co whispered, maybe you are right. And once that thought took root, it could not be pulled out. It grew in the dark soil of Co's mind, spreading roots that cracked the foundation of everything she had believed. The Americans were not demons, they were just people. Flawed, tired, homesick people who happened to be on the other side of a war. And if that was true, then who were the real demons? Co thought she knew the answer. But knowing it and accepting it were two very different things. December arrived with cooler air and rumors of Christmas. The American soldiers began decorating the mess tent with garlands made from palm fronds and scraps of red cloth. They hung a makeshift star at the peak of the tent, visible from across the camp. The women watched these preparations with curiosity and confusion. Christmas meant nothing to them. It was a Western holiday, a Christian celebration from a foreign culture. But the Americans were preparing something. Co had been working in the administrative office for nearly 3 months now. Her English had improved enough that she could understand basic conversations, though speaking remained difficult. Bill Patterson had become something she never expected an American to be. Not quite a friend because the gap between prisoner and captor could not be fully bridged, but something close. A person she respected. A person whose presence in the office felt comfortable rather than threatening. One afternoon in mid-December, Bill was sorting through photographs that had arrived in the mail. Pictures from home. He held one up, studying it with an expression Co had learned meant he was feeling homesick. My farm, he said, showing her the photo. Iowa. Winter. Co looked at the image. Snow-covering fields that stretched to the horizon. A red barn. A white farmhouse with smoke rising from the chimney. It looked peaceful. Impossibly peaceful compared to the destroyed landscape of the Philippines. Beautiful, Co said in English. Bill smiled slightly. I miss it. The quiet, the snow, just me and the cows, and nobody shooting at anybody. You go back, Co asked. After war, Bill nodded. Yeah, after this is done, I go back. Work the farm, maybe get married, have kids. Normal life. He looked at her directly. You go back to Osaka, see your family. Co felt her throat tighten. Yes, when they let us. I go back. They will let you, Bill said. War is over. You go home eventually, see your mother again. The certainty in his voice made Co want to cry. He said it like it was simple, like she could just walk back into her old life. But what life was there to return to? Her home was ash. Her family was starving. And she had spent months in enemy hands eating well-growing healthy, learning to question everything she had been raised to believe. How could she go home carrying all of that? On December 20th, Captain Morrison gathered all the prisoners in the central clearing. He stood on a wooden platform so everyone could see him. The translator stood beside him, ready to repeat his words in Japanese. Ladies, the captain began. His voice was formal, but not unkind. In 5 days, we will celebrate Christmas. This is an important holiday for Americans, a time of peace and goodwill. We would like to invite you to join us for a special meal. Turkey, ham, potatoes, pie, traditional American Christmas dinner. The translator repeated this in Japanese. The women murmured among themselves. An invitation. To an American celebration. We understand this is not your holiday, the captain continued. But you have worked hard. You have followed the rules. And it is Christmas, a time for sharing what we have. We would be honored if you would eat with us. The murmuring grew louder. Michiko's faction saw this as another manipulation, a propaganda move. But others, Co among them, heard something different in the captain's voice. Not calculation, just a simple desire to share a tradition, to make something good out of something broken. Christmas morning arrived clear and bright. The women woke to the smell of cooking that was different from usual. Richer, more complex. The Americans had been preparing food since before dawn. When they entered the mess tent, the women stopped and stared. The tent had been transformed. The tables were covered with white sheets. Candles flickered in tin cans. The palm frond garlands hung from the ceiling interwoven with red ribbons, and at the center of each table sat the food. Roasted turkeys, golden brown and enormous. Hams glazed with something sweet. Mountains of mashed potatoes with butter melting on top. Gravy in huge bowls. vegetables, rolls, and pies. Apple pies and pumpkin pies and sweet potato pies, more dessert than the women had seen in their entire lives. American soldiers stood along the walls, also staring at the food. This was a feast beyond what even they normally received. Someone had pulled strings, called in favors, diverted supplies. This was not standard military rations. This was someone deciding that Christmas mattered enough to make it special. Captain Morrison stood at the front of the tent. "Please," he said through the translator, "sit, eat. Merry Christmas." The women sat slowly, still uncertain. American soldiers began serving the food, heaping plates with portions that seemed impossible. Co received a plate with sliced turkey, ham, potatoes, 3 different vegetables, 2 rolls with butter, and a soldier told her she could come back for pie after. She looked down at her plate and felt tears start. This was more food than her entire family in Osaka would see in a month. More food than some Japanese families would see in a year. And it was being given to prisoners, to the enemy. Across the tent, Bill Patterson caught her eye. He raised his cup of water in a small salute. "Merry Christmas, Co," he called. Co raised her own cup, her hand shaking. "Merry Christmas," she called back in English. And then they ate. The turkey was unlike anything Co had ever tasted, moist and tender, flavored with herbs she could not name. The ham was sweet and salty at once. The mashed potatoes were creamy and rich. The rolls were soft as clouds. Every bite was a revelation. Around her, women ate and cried. The cognitive dissonance was crushing. They were prisoners of war. They were supposed to be suffering. Instead, they were eating the best meal of their lives. Yuki sat beside Ko, eating with an expression of pure wonder. "This is what Americans eat," she whispered. "This is normal for them." Ko shook her head. "I think this is special, even for them. But yes, they have access to food like this. While we starved, they had this." "It is not fair," Yuki said. No, Ko agreed. "It is not fair. But it is real." After the meal, after the plates had been cleared and the women sat in a daze of fullness, someone started singing. An American soldier with a clear tenor voice began a Christmas carol. Silent Night, other soldiers joined in. The harmony filled the tent, beautiful and strange. Some of the women began to cry harder. Not from sadness now, but from the overwhelming weight of the moment. Enemy soldiers singing about peace while the world was still picking up the pieces of war. Then Sergeant Washington stood. His deep bass voice joined the song, adding a richness that made the tent seem to vibrate. And when that carol ended, he began another, a gospel hymn about hope and redemption. Ko closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. She thought about her mother in Osaka, probably hungry, probably cold, probably wondering if her daughter was even alive. She thought about Bill's brother James dead on Okinawa. She thought about all the death and destruction and hatred that had brought them to this moment. And she thought about how strange it was that here in this tent on this day, there was something that felt almost like peace. After the singing ended, a photographer appeared, a young private with a camera moving through the tent taking pictures, recording the day. He approached one table where American soldiers sat mixed with Japanese prisoners. "Picture," he asked, gesturing with the camera. The soldiers nodded. Some of the women looked uncertain. But Yuki smiled. "Yes," she said in English. "Picture." The photographer arranged them. 3 American soldiers, 5 Japanese women, standing together behind the table. He was about to snap the photo when Bill Patterson walked over. "Room for one more?" he asked. The group shifted, making space. Bill stood next to Ko. She could feel the warmth of him beside her, smell the soap he used, so different from the soap they gave the prisoners. For a moment, she froze. This was wrong. She should not be standing next to an American soldier, smiling for a camera, as if they were friends. But then Bill leaned slightly toward her and said quietly, "Just smile, Ko. It is Christmas. Just smile." So she did. The flash went off, capturing the moment. American soldiers and Japanese prisoners standing together, some smiling, some looking uncertain, but all there, all human, all caught in the same strange moment of shared humanity. After the photographer moved on, Bill handed Ko something. A print of the photograph, still wet, developed quickly in a makeshift darkroom. "For you," Bill said. "So you remember." Ko took the photograph with trembling hands. There she was, standing between Yuki and Bill Patterson, a small smile on her face. She looked healthy, well-fed, almost happy. This is the most dangerous photograph in the world, she thought, because it proved everything she had been taught was a lie. It proved that enemies could share a meal, could stand together, could be for one moment just people. She folded the photograph carefully and tucked it into her pocket. It felt like carrying evidence of treason, but she could not destroy it, could not throw away proof that this moment had happened. That night, lying on her cot, Ko pulled out the photograph again, studied it in the dim light. Yuki leaned over from the next cot. "Let me see." Ko showed her. Yuki traced her own face in the photo with one finger. "I look happy," she said, wonder in her voice. "I did not realize I was smiling." "You were," Ko said. "We both were." Yuki was quiet for a moment. "Ko, what happens when we go home? When we tell people about this, about the food and the kindness and the Christmas dinner?" Ko had thought about this question every day since the letters from home had started arriving. "We do not tell them," she said finally. "We cannot tell them. They would not understand. They would call us traitors, collaborators." "But we did nothing wrong," Yuki protested. "We were just prisoners. We did not choose any of this." "It does not matter," Ko said. "The truth does not matter when everyone has already decided what they want to believe." Yuki's eyes filled with tears. "So we lie. We go home and pretend it was terrible, pretend they treated us badly." Ko felt something break inside her chest. Yes, we lie. Or we tell the truth and live as outcasts. Those are our choices. The weight of that realization settled over both of them. They had survived the war. They had survived captivity. But they might not survive the truth of their own experience. Ko started keeping a diary in January. The writing was private, dangerous, never meant to be read by anyone else. She wrote in Japanese in characters small and tight, filling the pages of a notebook she had bought at the canteen. January 5th, 1946. Today I gained another pound. I should be ashamed. I am ashamed. But I am also grateful. And that gratitude is worse. How can I be grateful to the enemy? What does that make me? January 12th, 1946. Yuki asked me today if I hate the Americans. I could not answer. I want to hate them. I should hate them. But when Bill Patterson helped me with my English today, when he patiently repeated words until I understood, I did not feel hate. I felt grateful. I felt respect. And that terrifies me. January 20th, 1946. Michiko refuses to thank any American for anything. Some women admire her strength, but I wonder if it is strength or just stubbornness. Is clinging to hatred in the face of kindness brave, or is it just foolish? The internal conflict was worst at night. Ko would lie on her cot and hear voices arguing in her head. Her father's voice from childhood. "You are Japanese. Your loyalty is to the emperor, to the nation. That loyalty must never waver." But another voice, newer and more insistent. "What nation? The nation that lied to us. The nation that told us to die rather than surrender and then surrendered anyway. The nation that is starving while we eat." Her teacher's voice from school. "The Americans are inferior, without honor, without culture, barbarians who understand only violence." But the evidence of her eyes. The Americans had order, discipline, organization. They followed rules. They treated prisoners according to laws they had written before the war even started. What kind of barbarians wrote laws to protect their enemies? Her mother's voice from her last letter. "Come home. We need you. Your family needs you." But her own voice, quiet and ashamed. "What if I do not want to go home? What if home means starving again? What if I have seen something better and I cannot unsee it?" That last thought filled her with such shame that she often cried. What kind of daughter thought such things? What kind of Japanese woman preferred captivity to home? But the thought would not leave. It grew stronger every day. One afternoon, Ko overheard two American soldiers talking outside the administrative office. She was inside, but the window was open, and their voices carried. "Says here, Japan is in bad shape," one soldier said. "Famine, disease. Economy completely collapsed." "That is what they get," the other replied. "They started it. Pearl Harbor, Bataan, all those atrocities." Maybe the first soldier said. "But I still feel bad for the regular folks, the civilians. They did not ask for this war. You feel bad for them." After Pearl Harbor, after everything, yeah, I do, does not make me a traitor, just makes me human. Ko sat frozen at her desk, hardly breathing. That American soldier felt sympathy for Japanese civilians, for people like her family. He felt bad for the suffering, even though Japan had attacked his country. Even though Japanese soldiers had killed Americans. It did not fit. It broke the neat categories she had been taught. Americans were supposed to be cruel, vengeful. They were supposed to celebrate Japanese suffering. But here was a soldier saying he felt bad, saying that feeling sympathy for suffering people did not make him a traitor, just made him human. That night, Co wrote in her diary, "If the Americans can feel sympathy for us, their enemies, then what does that make them? And what does that make us, who were taught to feel nothing but hatred?" The question terrified her because she knew the answer meant everything she had believed was backwards. By late January, the women's section of the camp had clearly divided into two groups. Michiko's tent became the gathering place for loyalists, women who clung to their Japanese identity, who saw acceptance of American kindness as a weakness to be resisted. Ko went to one of their meetings curious to hear what they were saying. "We must remember who we are," Michiko said, firmly addressing the group. "The Americans are breaking us with kindness, with abundance, with comfort. They want us to forget our duty, to forget that we are Japanese. We must resist. But they are kind to us," a young woman said softly. "Does that not mean something?" Michiko's eyes flashed. "Kindness is a weapon, more dangerous than bullets because you do not see it coming. They feed us so we will feel grateful. They treat us well so we will feel indebted. And when we go home, we will speak well of them. We will tell everyone how generous they were. That is their strategy. That is how they win." Ko listened and felt something twist inside her. Michiko was reducing every act of decency to manipulation, every smile to calculation, every gesture of humanity to propaganda. It seemed exhausting, impossibly wrong, but she said nothing, just listened and left quietly. The other group, the questioners, met in smaller clusters, less formal, more dangerous because questioning was treason. Ko found herself drawn to these conversations. Setsuko was usually at the center, speaking with a frankness that made Ko nervous. "I do not think we were told the truth," Setsuko said one night. "About the Americans, about the war, maybe about everything. That is treasonous," someone warned. "Treason against what?" Setsuko replied. "The empire that abandoned us, that told us to die rather than surrender, and then surrendered anyway. That left us here to face the enemy alone." Silence greeted that question because it was true. The empire had surrendered, had told millions of Japanese to fight to the death and then had given up, had left soldiers and civilians scattered across the Pacific to face whatever came next. "I got a letter from my sister in Tokyo," another woman named Aiko said. "She says the Americans occupying Japan are better than expected. They are rebuilding, giving food aid. She says some soldiers are even dating Japanese girls." Gasps of shock rippled through the group. "My cousin wrote too," another woman added. "He said the Americans are writing a new constitution for Japan, giving women the right to vote." This caused an even bigger stir. In Imperial Japan, women were second-class citizens, property of their fathers, then their husbands. The idea of women having political power was unthinkable. "In America, women already vote," Setsuko explained. "They work, own property, have rights we never dreamed of." "If that is true," Yuki said slowly, "then everything we were taught about American society, being inferior, about their culture, being weak, it is all backwards." Ko felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, not just about the war, not just about the Americans as individuals, but about the entire structure of the world as she had understood it. Maybe everything was backwards. These conversations happened more frequently as January turned to February. The newspapers that came from Japan showed that the occupation was not the bloodbath they had been promised. American aid was flowing in. Schools were reopening. The emperor had not been executed. MacArthur was rebuilding, not destroying. The cognitive dissonance was crushing. Everything they had been told would happen did not happen. Everything they had been promised was a lie. In March, the ideological rift escalated into a physical confrontation. Haruko, one of Michiko's loyalists, confronted Setsuko in the mess tent, accused her of being a traitor, of collaborating with the enemy, of betraying Japan. Setsuko stood her ground. "I am not betraying Japan. I am just refusing to keep lying to myself. The Americans treat us well. That is a fact. They follow their own laws. That is a fact. And our own military treated us worse than the enemy does. That is also a fact. Haruko slapped her. The sound echoed through the tent. Women gasped. Soldiers moved forward to intervene. Bill Patterson stepped between them. He did not need the translator. The situation was clear. I do not know what you are arguing about, he said firmly, but you can believe whatever you want. You can hate us if you want, but you cannot fight each other. You are all in this together. The two women were separated. Haruko was confined to her tent for 3 days. Setsuko received medical attention for a split lip. But the real damage was not physical. The camp was fracturing along ideological lines and everyone knew it. Ko found herself pulled increasingly towards Setsuko's side, not because she wanted to betray Japan, but because the evidence was overwhelming. The more she looked at the truth, the more her old beliefs crumbled. The transformation happened slowly, then all at once. It was the accumulation of 1,000 small moments. The medic who stayed up 3 nights caring for a woman with pneumonia. The cook who learned to make rice the Japanese way because he noticed the women preferred it. The guard who gave Yuki his candy ration on her birthday because he knew she was homesick. Each act of kindness was a small hammer blow against the edifice of hatred they had been taught to maintain. But the real breaking point came in April. A group of women, Ko among them, were taken outside the camp to help rebuild a damaged Filipino village. The war had destroyed everything. Houses burned, fields ruined. The villagers were trying to rebuild, and the Americans had volunteered their prisoners to help. During a water break, a young Filipino woman approached Ko. She could not have been more than 20. She spoke in broken English. Japanese soldiers, she said, pointing to the ruins around them. They burn village. They kill my father. Ko's heart stopped. This woman's father had been killed by Japanese soldiers. Maybe by men Ko had worked alongside. Maybe by the machine Ko had been a small part of. I am sorry, Ko managed in English. I am so sorry. The Filipino woman studied Ko for a long moment. Then her expression softened slightly. You not soldier, you just girl, like me. War make everyone suffer. Now war over. We build, not break. That simple statement, you just girl like me, cracked something fundamental inside Ko's chest. She was not Japanese first and human second. She was not a representative of the empire. She was just a girl, just a person, caught in forces bigger than herself. No more responsible for the war than this Filipino woman was. No more guilty than any other civilian trying to survive. That evening back at camp, Ko gathered Yuki, Setsuko, and a few others. She had made a decision. I think we were wrong about everything, she said. That is dangerous talk, someone warned. I do not care anymore, Ko said. The empire told us we were special, chosen, superior. But it was all lies. We are not special. We are just people who were fed propaganda. And the most dangerous thing we can do now is keep believing those lies when the truth is right in front of us. The most dangerous thing, she continued, her voice stronger now, is to keep pretending. The Americans are not demons. They are just people, flawed people, but people who are treating us better than our own government ever did. And we were part of a machine that brought suffering to others. Acknowledging that is not betrayal. It is truth. Silence filled the space. Then Yuki spoke. I agree with Ko. I am tired of pretending. One by one, others nodded. The group of questioners was growing. Even some of Michiko's loyalists were beginning to soften, beginning to crack under the weight of accumulated kindness. That night, Ko took out the Christmas photograph, looked at her own smiling face, at Bill Patterson standing beside her, at the proof that enemies could be human. She thought about the soap at the river, about the first plate of food, about classical music in the administrative office, and gospel singing in the evening light. The Americans had not just defeated Japan with bombs. They had defeated the ideology with something more powerful. They had shown that democracy treated people better than fascism. That freedom was stronger than control. That kindness could change minds where cruelty only hardened them. And Ko could not deny it anymore. She had lived it. She had seen it. And she would carry that knowledge for the rest of her life, dangerous as it was. But what would she do with that knowledge when she finally went home? The answer came sooner than she expected. May arrived with the smell of flowers and the weight of inevitability. The rainy season was ending. The heat was becoming bearable, and rumors that had been whispers for weeks became official announcements. Captain Morrison called all prisoners to the central clearing on a Tuesday morning. The sky was cloudless and blue. Birds sang in the trees beyond the fence. It was a beautiful day for news that felt like the end of the world. Ladies, the captain began through the translator. I have important information. The United States military has arranged for your repatriation to Japan. Ships will arrive within 6 weeks. You will all be going home. The clearing erupted in sound. Some women cried out in joy. Others stood frozen. Ko felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Home. 6 weeks. The war had been over for 9 months. She had been in American captivity for 8. And now she would return to a Japan she no longer recognized, carrying the truth she could not speak. Around her, women were embracing, crying, laughing. But Ko saw Yuki standing apart from the celebration, her face pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like terror. Your time here was conducted according to the laws of war and principles of human dignity. Captain Morrison continued, you were prisoners, yes, but also human beings. I hope when you return to Japan, you will remember that Americans are not the monsters you were taught we are. We are just people, like you. He paused and his voice softened. I hope someday our nations can be friends instead of enemies. I hope your generation will build that friendship. The translator's voice broke slightly on the last words. That night, Ko could not sleep. She walked to the fence line and stood staring at the darkness beyond. The Philippine jungle, the destroyed city, the life she had built in this strange in-between place where she was neither quite prisoner nor quite free. She heard footsteps behind her. Yuki, I do not want to leave, Yuki whispered. Ko turned to look at her, the young girl who had screamed at the riverbank 8 months ago, who had thought she would die that day, who had learned to smile again in captivity. Neither do I, Ko admitted. The words hung in the air between them. Treason, betrayal. Admitting that they preferred enemy captivity to home. My family is starving, Yuki continued, her voice breaking. And I look healthy. They will see me and they will know I ate while they suffered. They will hate me. My mother's last letter asked when I was coming home. Ko said quietly, she needs me. My father is sick. My brother can barely work. And all I can think is that I do not want to go back to hunger, to cold, to a bombed-out warehouse and rice mixed with sawdust. What does that make us, Yuki asked. Human, Ko said. Just human. And that is the thing they never wanted us to understand. The next morning, Bill Patterson was sorting files when Ko arrived at the office. He looked up and their eyes met. He knew. Of course he knew. The whole camp knew. 6 weeks, he said simply. Yes. Ko sat at her desk and tried to type, but her fingers would not work properly. After a few minutes, Bill stood and walked to the small radio he had brought months ago. He turned it on. Classical music filled the office. Chopin, a nocturne sad and beautiful. They worked in silence for an hour. Then Bill spoke without looking up from his papers. I will miss you, Ko. You do good work. Ko felt tears sting her eyes. I will miss you too. You taught me many things. Not just English, Bill said. His voice was quiet. You taught me things too. About seeing people instead of enemies. He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled open a drawer and took out an envelope. He walked to Ko's desk and handed it to her. Do not open it until you are on the ship, he said. Promise me. I promise. Their fingers touched briefly as she took the envelope. Then Bill returned to his desk and they did not speak of it again. The 6 weeks passed like water through fingers, too fast and too slow at once. The women prepared to leave, sorted their few possessions, wrote final letters, said quiet goodbyes to the routines that had become familiar. Ko bought one more Hershey bar at the canteen, saved it, wrapped it carefully. A piece of America to carry home, though she knew it would melt in the Philippine heat before she reached Japan. On the last Sunday, Corporal Miller organized a baseball game. Americans and Japanese women together. Ko had never played baseball before. She swung the bat and missed 3 times and everyone laughed, but it was kind laughter. Yuki hit the ball and ran the wrong direction, and even Machiko smiled. Sergeant Washington sang one more time. The whole camp gathered to listen. His voice rose into the evening sky, powerful and mournful and beautiful. Amazing grace. Some of the women had learned enough English to understand the words. A wretch like me was blind, but now I see. Ko closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. She was not blind anymore. She had seen too much, understood too much, and that seeing would haunt her forever. The night before they left, Nurse Dorothy found Ko packing her small bag. The nurse sat on the edge of Ko's cot, something she had never done before. A breach of the careful distance between captor and prisoner. "I know it will be hard," Dorothy said through the translator. "Going home," trying to explain. Ko nodded, unable to speak. "Just remember," Dorothy continued, "you survived. You stayed human. You did not let hate consume you. That is worth something." "But will they see it that way?" Ko asked. "Or will they see a traitor who grew fat on enemy food?" Dorothy was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took Ko's hand, a gesture so forbidden, so impossible, that Ko nearly pulled away. "The people who matter will understand eventually," Dorothy said. "Maybe not now, maybe not for years, but truth has a way of surviving, even when it is dangerous." She squeezed Ko's hand once and then let go. "Good luck, Ko. I hope you find peace." That night, Ko lay on her cot for the last time. She thought about the soap that had started everything, about the Christmas photograph hidden in her bag, about Bill's envelope waiting to be opened, about 8 months of small kindnesses that had shattered her understanding of the world. Tomorrow she would board a ship, would sail back to a destroyed nation, would face a family who had suffered while she had not, and she would have to choose between truth and survival. The morning came too soon and too late. The women assembled in the clearing one final time. American soldiers helped load their bags onto trucks, the same trucks that had brought them to the river 8 months ago. Bill Patterson stood near the administrative building, watching. Ko walked over to him, her heart pounding. "Thank you," she said in careful English, "for everything, for seeing me as person, not just enemy." Bill's eyes were red. "You take care of yourself, Ko. Go home, see your mother, build a good life." He paused, then added quietly, "And maybe someday when things are different, you tell someone the truth about this place, about what really happened here." "I will try," Ko promised. They did not shake hands. The distance between prisoner and captor had to be maintained to the end, but something passed between them. An understanding, an acknowledgement of the strange friendship that had grown in the cracks of enmity. Ko turned and walked to the truck where Yuki was waiting. As she climbed in, she looked back one more time. Bill raised his hand in a small wave. Ko raised hers in return. Then the canvas closed and the truck began to move. The ship was a military transport, gray and utilitarian. The 247 women were assigned to holds below deck, cramped but clean. They were given rations for the journey. Rice, canned vegetables. Nothing like the abundance of the camp, but more than most of them had seen before their captivity. On the second day at sea, Ko remembered Bill's envelope. She found a quiet corner and opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and the Christmas photograph, another copy of the one he had given her that day. On the back, in Bill's careful handwriting, were words in English. To Ko, December 25th, 1945. The day we prove to enemies can be friends. May you always remember that kindness is stronger than hate. Bill Patterson. And below that, an address. A farm in Iowa. Des Moines. Ko held the photograph and the letter and cried. Not from sadness exactly, but from the weight of everything. The impossibility of what she was carrying home. The ship docked in Yokohama on June 15th, 1946, 10 months after the war had ended, 9 months after Ko had expected to the Philippine riverbank. The women disembarked slowly, stepping onto Japanese soil for the first time in years. The dock was chaos. American military personnel processing paperwork. Japanese officials trying to organize transportation. Red Cross workers handing out information sheets. And everywhere the evidence of destruction. Yokohama had been bombed repeatedly. Entire neighborhoods were gone. The city Ko, remembered bustling and alive, was now a skeleton. Buildings stood gutted. Streets were rubble. People moved through the ruins like ghosts. "This is home," Yuki whispered beside Ko. "This is what we came back to." Ko was given a train ticket to Osaka. Departure in 2 hours. She waited at the station, watching other women reunite with family members who had come to meet them. Saw the embraces, heard the crying, watched mothers and daughters cling to each other. No one had come to meet Ko. Her mother did not know when she would arrive, did not know she was even coming. The train ride took 12 hours. Every mile revealed more devastation. Cities reduced to ash, factories bombed, fields plowed but barely planted because there were not enough people to work them. Japan had not just lost the war. Japan had been broken. Ko shared her rations with a woman who had 3 hungry children. The woman accepted with pathetic gratitude, bowing so deeply, Ko thought she might never stand up straight again. This is the nation I served, Ko thought. This is what all the loyalty and sacrifice was for. Ash and hunger and mothers who cannot feed their children. Osaka Station was half destroyed, but functioning. Ko stepped off the train into evening light. The address where her family had lived no longer existed. That entire neighborhood was gone, bombed to nothing. But her mother's last letter had mentioned a warehouse in the Minami district. Ko walked through streets she barely recognized. Every corner held memories of what had been. Her school now rubble. The park where she had played as a child, now a makeshift gravesite. The department store where her mother had bought fabric, now a burned shell. The warehouse stood near the river, listing slightly to one side, its roof partially collapsed. But people had made it livable. Sections were walled off with scraps of wood and cloth. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children played in the dirt outside. Ko approached slowly, her heart hammering. She asked an old woman where the Tanaka family lived. The woman pointed to a corner section on the second floor. Ko climbed the exterior stairs, each step feeling like walking toward her own execution. She reached a cloth partition, heard voices inside. Her mother's voice, thinner than Ko remembered, older. She pulled back the cloth and stepped inside. The space was perhaps 10 feet by 10 feet, divided by a hanging blanket into sleeping and living areas. Her mother sat on the floor mending a shirt by the light of a single candle. Her father lay on a mat, his breathing labored. Her brother sat in the corner so thin Ko almost did not recognize him. Mother, Ko said. Her mother's head snapped up. The shirt fell from her hands. For a long moment she just stared. Then she stood, her movements slow, like she was much older than her years. Ko, she breathed. They fell into each other's arms. Ko felt her mother's body skeletal under the thin clothing. Felt the bones of her spine. Smelled the hunger on her. You came home, her mother sobbed. I thought you were dead. I thought I would never see you again. Ko held her mother and cried. But underneath the relief, underneath the joy of reunion, Ko felt something else. Her mother's hands on her arms, feeling the flesh there. The muscle, the health. Her mother pulled back and looked at Ko, really looked at her, took in her face no longer hollow, her body no longer skeletal, her skin clear and healthy. You look well, her mother said. And in those 3 words, Ko heard the question that would hang between them forever. How the Americans treated us according to their laws, Ko said carefully. Geneva Convention. We had enough to eat. Her mother's face hardened almost imperceptibly. We heard stories about the camps, about women who survived by cooperating with the enemy. The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. I typed documents, Ko said, her voice firm despite her shaking hands. I did office work. And yes, I ate their food because the alternative was starvation. I am not ashamed of surviving. Of course not, her father said quickly from his mat. His voice was weak. We are just glad you are alive. So glad. But Ko could see it in their eyes. The question they could not ask. The suspicion they could not voice. Their daughter had left thin and had returned healthy while they had starved. That night they shared thin rice gruel. Ko ate her portion and said nothing about beef stew or turkey or mashed potatoes with butter. The guilt was crushing, but she had expected it, had known it would be like this. What she had not expected was how much she would miss the camp. The clean cot, the regular meals, the simple dignity of work and payment and freedom to walk under open sky. 2 weeks later, Ko found Yuki in what remained of a park near the harbor. Yuki was sitting on a broken bench staring at nothing. My family thinks I am tainted, Yuki said when Ko sat beside her. They do not say it directly, but I hear them talking when they think I am asleep, about how I look too healthy, about how I spent months with American soldiers, about how no respectable man will marry me now. Ko took Yuki's hand, mine too. My mother watches me like I am a stranger. She asked questions about the camp and I try to answer truthfully, but I can see her not believing me. How can we tell them, Yuki asked, her voice breaking. How can we explain that the enemy showed us more kindness than our own military ever did, that we learned humanity from the people we were taught to hate? We cannot, Ko said quietly. Not now, maybe not ever. So we just live with it, this knowing, this truth we can never speak. Ko was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out the Christmas photograph, showed it to Yuki. There they were smiling, healthy, standing next to American soldiers. We keep this, Ko said. We remember. And maybe someday when enough time has passed, we can tell the truth. But not now. Now we have to survive. Yuki stared at the photograph. I hate this, she whispered. I hate that we have to pretend, that surviving with dignity is somehow shameful. I know, Ko said. I hate it too. They sat together in silence, two young women who had learned too much and could say too little. Around them, Yokohama rebuilt itself slowly, but the rebuilding happening inside Ko and Yuki was harder, more painful, and entirely invisible. The years passed like water wearing stone, slowly, invisibly, but leaving marks that could not be erased. Ko found work as a typist in a government office. She was good at it, fast and accurate, but she could not tell anyone that she had learned her speed typing for an American sergeant who said please and thank you. She watched Japan transform under American occupation, watched General MacArthur's reforms reshape the country. Women got the right to vote. The Constitution was rewritten. Democracy was imposed like medicine on a sick patient. And Ko said nothing, typed her documents, went home to the warehouse, cared for her aging parents. She never married. The rumors about her time as a POW, vague and unspecified, made her unmarriageable in conservative Osaka society. She told herself she did not mind. Marriage would have required explaining, lying, pretending to be someone she was not. Yuki did marry eventually, an older widower who needed a wife and was not particular about her past. Ko attended the wedding, watched Yuki bow in her white kimono, and said nothing about the girl who had tasted American chocolate and cried at gospel singing. Ko kept the Christmas photograph hidden, the diary too, buried at the bottom of a wooden box under her sleeping mat. Sometimes late at night when her parents were asleep, she would take them out and read. Remember, Bill Patterson's letter stayed folded inside the diary. She never wrote to the Iowa address. What would she say? Thank you for teaching me that everything I believed was a lie. Thank you for showing me kindness when my own people showed me none. Some words were too dangerous to write. Japan recovered. Slowly at first, then, with shocking speed, the economy grew. Cities were rebuilt. By the 1960s, Osaka was thriving again, sleek and modern. The warehouse where Ko's family had lived was torn down, replaced by apartments. Ko moved her parents to a small flat, got a better job, watched her country transform from defeated enemy to American ally, watched everything she had learned in the camp become official policy. Democracy, women's rights, partnership with America. The things she had been punished for believing were now the foundation of her nation. But still, she said nothing. In 1968, Ko was 47 years old. Her mother had died 2 years earlier. Her father was bedridden, cared for by Ko's brother. Ko lived alone in a tiny apartment in the Kita district. She worked at a university now in the administrative offices. It was there that she met Yumi, a 19-year-old student who worked part-time filing documents. Yumi was everything Ko had been at that age. Bright, curious, full of questions about the world. She was writing her senior thesis on the Pacific War. One afternoon, Yumi came to Ko's desk with a question. Miss Tanaka, you were alive during the war, yes? Ko nodded. Yes, I was. Can I interview you? For my thesis, I want to include personal accounts, not just official histories. Ko felt her heart start to race. What is your thesis about? About how the war ended, about the occupation, about how enemies became allies. Yumi leaned forward, her eyes bright. The official story is all about MacArthur and the reforms and the peace treaty, but I want to know what it was really like for ordinary people. How did they experience the change? Ko looked at this young woman, this girl who had been born after the war, who had grown up in a Japan allied with America, who had no memory of the propaganda or the hatred or the lies. And Ko made a decision. Come to my apartment on Sunday, she said. I will tell you my story. That Sunday, Yumi arrived with a notebook and recording device. Ko made tea. They sat at her small table, and Ko went to the wooden box under her bed. She pulled out the diary, the Christmas photograph, Bill's letter, laid them on the table. Yumi picked up the photograph, her eyes widened. Is this you with American soldiers? Yes, Ko said. December 25th, 1945, in a prisoner of war camp in the Philippines. And then Ko told her everything. She spoke for 3 hours. Yumi's tea went cold, her notebook filled with writing. The recording device captured every word. Ko told her about the riverbank, about the soap that smelled like flowers, about the first meal that made women cry, about Bill Patterson who said please and thank you even though his brother had been killed by Japanese soldiers. She told her about the Christmas dinner, about the photograph that proved enemies could be human, about learning that everything she had been taught was a lie. She told her about the guilt of eating while her family starved, about the shame of feeling grateful to the enemy, about 23 years of silence because the truth was too dangerous. When she finished, Yumi sat stunned, silent, tears streaming down her face. They taught us in school that the Americans were brutal occupiers. In some ways, Yumi finally said, that they imposed democracy by force, that it was difficult and painful. They are lying to you, Ko interrupted. Not completely, but they are not telling you the whole truth, just like they lied to me. She picked up the Christmas photograph. The Americans I met were not brutal. They were just people. Tired, homesick people who followed laws that protected even their enemies. And that kindness was more powerful than any weapon. But why did you wait so long to tell anyone, Yumi asked. Because Ko said quietly, admitting that the enemy showed us mercy means admitting that our own side was wrong. It means questioning everything. And after the war, Japan was not ready for that kind of truth. Are we ready now? Ko looked at this young woman, this new generation that had grown up in peace, that had known America as ally, not enemy. I do not know, Ko said, but I am tired of silence. I am tired of pretending. So I am telling you, and you can decide what to do with the truth. Yumi included Ko's story in her thesis, changed her name to protect her. But the details were all there. The soap, the food, the Christmas dinner, the photograph. The thesis received honors. A professor read it and wanted to publish it. Ko said no, not yet, not with her name. Not while her father was still alive, not while the shame could still hurt her family. But she kept talking to Yumi, answering questions, filling in details, building a record. And slowly, Ko began to understand something. She had survived the war. She had survived captivity. She had survived the return to a destroyed Japan. But she had not survived the silence. The silence had eaten away at her for 23 years, had turned her truth into shame, her experience into something to hide. But now, speaking it aloud, Ko felt something shift. The burden was still heavy, but it was shared. And sharing made it bearable. In 1970, her father died. Ko was free of the last obligation to keep silent. But by then she was tired, old. The world was moving on without her. Yumi graduated and became a journalist. She kept in touch with Ko, visited her sometimes, brought her stories about the changing relationship between Japan and America. In 1985, on the 40th anniversary of the war's end, Yumi wrote an article for a major newspaper. It was about second chances, about enemies becoming allies, about how small acts of kindness could change the world. She quoted an anonymous former prisoner of war, a woman who had learned humanity from the enemy. Ko read the article in her apartment. She was 64 years old, living alone, working part-time, but she read Yumi's words and felt something she had not felt in decades. Pride, not in the war, not in the empire, but in herself, in her survival, in her refusal to let hatred consume her. The Americans had not just defeated Japan with bombs, they had shown that a better way was possible, and Ko had been there to witness it, to live it. That was worth something. Ko died in 1992 at the age of 71. She had never married, had no children, lived quietly and simply, but in the wooden box under her bed she left everything: the diary, the Christmas photograph, Bill's letter, and a note for Yumi. Tell them the truth. Tell them that the greatest weapon America ever used was not the atomic bomb. It was soap. It was bread. It was basic human decency extended to enemies. Tell them that kindness changed more minds than cruelty ever could. Tell them that I learned to be human from the people I was taught to hate. And tell them that this lesson is worth remembering. Always. Yumi published Ko's story in 1995 on the 50th anniversary of the war's end. She used Ko's real name with permission from her estate, included the photograph, quoted extensively from the diary. The reaction was mixed. Some praised Ko's honesty, others condemned her as a collaborator. But mostly people read it and thought about war, about enemies, about the distance between propaganda and truth, about how a bar of soap given to a terrified woman at a Philippine riverbank had changed one life completely. And through that one life had helped change the understanding of an entire generation. Today, the Christmas photograph hangs in the Osaka Peace Museum. Ko and Yuki stand smiling next to Bill Patterson and American soldiers, enemies and friends in the same frame. Below it, a placard reads, December 25th, 1945, American POW Camp, Philippines. This photograph proves that even in war, humanity can survive, that enemies can become our friends, that kindness is the most powerful weapon of all. Ko would have liked that, would have appreciated the simplicity, the truth. She spent her life carrying the weight of that truth, the burden of knowing that everything she had been taught was wrong, the shame of feeling grateful to the enemy, the isolation of silence. But she survived it, kept the truth alive, passed it on. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all. Not the victory of bombs or battles or treaties, but the victory of one woman who refused to let hate consume her, who chose to remember kindness, who proved that even in the darkest moments, humanity could shine through. The soap that changed everything, the bread that fed more than bodies, the simple dignity of being treated as human by those who could have chosen cruelty. These were the weapons that truly changed the world. And Ko's story stands as eternal proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness are the ones that echo longest through history.